welcome back here with me again today. What I wanted to talk about and share was something that I've been thinking about, something that's been on my mind, and I hope you might find it interesting. It's to do with families and maybe the role that you had within your family, whether you've ever paused to think about what your role was or how that has affected you, the expectations that perhaps you never realised that your family had around you, and how this may have influenced you in your life and now as to what's happening. Expectations, I mean, it can be often that you find yourself in a role of keeping the family together. If it's not you who arranges, I don't know, Christmas or Thanksgiving or birthdays or whatever event that actually sort of like comes up, that you don't see each other, and you find that you're the one who, for whatever reason, is the person who's pulling everybody together, and this has been your role for most of your life really, and that other people just seem to sit on their hands and do nothing. Or it might be that you have had the role of a favoured child, and that, you know, your relationship has always been sort of like very good with your family. But again, you know, there's something to be said for being the favourite, especially if you've got siblings, because it might actually have affected your relationship with them. You might be somebody who has never been favoured in your family. You might be somebody who has elder siblings or younger siblings that have had much more sort of attention and time from family members than you ever had, and it's been made clear to you as to you know, what your position is in the family and what is expected of you. And for whatever reason, it doesn't matter how hard you've tried, your family hasn't, you know, you've never had that good relationship with your mother, you've never had that good relationship with your father, and it doesn't matter what results you achieved or how much you put yourself out, you just have never ever received the attention that another child in the system has. All of these things have a genesis in how they affect us and how they you know, how we go into life and what our focus is when we go forward into life. What I'm going to talk about is the family really as a system, and how, if you're fortunate enough, you can be in a system where all the components of the system are working brilliantly. The analogy I'm going to use for this is because it springs to mind, is the central heating system. So for all of the central heating system to work properly, you have to have a boiler, you have to have pipes going from the boiler to the radiators, and the radiators all have to be balanced, and there can't be air in them, otherwise some radiators will be cold and some radiators will be hot, where they've got the water in them. So everything has to be within balance in that system for it to work properly. Now, if you do get something that is out of kilter in that system, what will happen is it will pull the whole system down. And this is similar to our family systems that we grow up in, and how very often it can be that one thing can go wrong in a system. It might be there is a child who's underachieving at school, and that's another thing, you know, this goes into society, into sort of expectations around what people are meant to achieve at school, and results that people are meant to get, and expectations, and And very often, if parents haven't been as successful personally, there can be a strong emphasis and to live their life vicariously through their children, and see their children as extensions of themselves that can go out and maybe create that life that they never had. So all of this is going on within the system, all of this and lots and lots and lots more. Very often people can have parents that they absolutely love and adore, but at the same time it's very difficult to reconcile that love that you have for your parents when maybe there's problems around alcoholism, abuse within the family, in whatever form that takes. There could be sort of issues around money, unemployment, and the frustrations actually come into the home, and the child experiences that right from, a very early age. It could be that when your mother was carrying you, that there were huge worries about how the family were going to provide for you, and it could be that it was a forced marriage, or there was sort of like heavy circumstances around your arrival, and all of that is going to have an effect on your nature way before you actually come into the world. And not only that, there's the trauma that your mother has carried from her mother, and their experience that all gets handed down and put into our DNA and our genetic material, and most of us are completely and utterly unaware of the effect and the repercussions that this may or may not have later on in life. So family systems can be a hotbed of trauma. There is so much material sort of like to talk about on various aspects of it that I would be doing a disservice if I just talked about just touching upon the various effects that it has on us. I mean, I remember when I was training, I remember there was some author who had written extensively on, he was kind of like the father, I suppose, of family therapy, and started to create the systemic therapy that is used in a lot of relationship and family counselling, and looking at the systems. And he came up with the concept that each child carries a lot of the karma of their parents. So it could be that the first child carries well, they call it neurosis in the therapeutic world, but I suppose you could call it karma too. But the first child carries the neurosis of the mother, the second child carries the neurosis of the father, and the third and subsequent children carry the neurosis of the couple. And very often when people would present, that would be quite true. Very often people would come along and depending on where their position was in the family, it would have a bearing on what was happening for them now and what was coming to life for them. And it wasn't something that was specific and gender related. It was something that just very often used to come up. So that's another thing, think about your position in the family. What child were you? Were you the, were you the first child, and did you sort of like have lots of sort of neurosis that maybe, or neurosis struggles that maybe your mother carried herself, or were you a second child and you had the struggles that your father had, or maybe you were subsequent children and you struggled with a lot of, both of what they actually sort of had between them as a couple. But it's a fascinating concept, and it's worth looking at and thinking about. And I always like to sort of like tie it in with what's happening in the invisible world, the spiritual world around us, what's going on in the unseen world that we can't see or fully know about. We can maybe feel it sometimes, but not actually completely, have complete clarity and a knowing of what's going on. And in this context, I think of ancestors. What ancestral history have we got in our family that could be creating issues now? Something that goes back generation after generation after generation. And I mean, I know that there's even biblical quotes around the sins of the father and how that may be creating problems now. And very often you'll find in families that you'll have somebody who is, immensely good, very kind and compassionate, and cares about everybody and wants everybody to get on well, and is and this I've found doesn't have really much bearing on the birthplace. It's sometimes you just get like a shining light that will want to look after and make sure that everybody is okay. And by the same token, you might find that you get the opposite in the family. You get people that will just completely drain and take as many resources as they can from another family member. And it might be that when that family member is in a position where they need help, nobody is forthcoming with it. So I suppose what I'm saying is we have to look at systems, and we have to look at how we balance them out. And very often I've noticed that in family systems where there is a huge disparity, that a person who is extremely good will be the one who ends up with huge amounts of stuff coming their way that feels overwhelming for them. And I think sometimes if you're that person in the family, you do have to sort of step back and look after yourself and disentangle yourself from something that could be potentially toxic. Because I believe, and I've seen this sort of like in real time in my work, that systems need to balance themselves out. And sometimes somebody who's feeling overwhelmed, abused and taken advantage of, and by the same token, when they've needed support or someone to rely on, that hasn't been there, I sometimes think you have to take a step back. I'm not saying you have to completely sever ties. You might want to do that. You might have to do that for your own peace of mind. But sometimes it can be very good to step back and take a neutral stance sometimes. Start looking at yourself and looking at where all of these triggers have come from, and all of these unconscious experiences that we begin to embody. you know, are they really serving us? Maybe they kept us safe at one time, but are they still serving us now? I think we all need to ask those questions. Anyway, let's just dip into it a bit. I might go into more about this in another little chat. So for now, I'm going to leave it, and take care. Bye.